It's another edition of Time About the Movies, and today we're taking a look at the many, many movies of Christmas weekend 2005. So I'm not even going to waste my time giving you a rundown of all the movies because we've got 8 movies to look at. This is going to be a long one, so brace yourselves. Let's get right to it. Let's start off with the biggest new release of the weekend. That is Jim Carrey and Téa Leoni starring in the remake of Fun with Dick and Jane. So, Fun with Dick and Jane is essentially a remake of the 1977 film of the same name, this time with Jim Carrey and Téa Leoni as a married middle-class couple who, after the husband's employer goes bankrupt, struggles to maintain jobs before eventually resorting to robberies. You have Alec Baldwin, Richard Jenkins among the cast in here, and you see in the trailer other people like John Michael Higgins. I've seen that guy in so many things. I should know who he is. John Michael Higgins is also in here. Angie Harmon, David Herman. You hear him in there. Stephanie Weir from Mad TV. Jason Marsden, Max from the Goofy movie. Clint Howard, Jeff Garlin, Laurie Metcalf, James Whitmore. I mean, there's a lot of. I think I said James Whitmore already, but there's a lot of people involved in this movie, and the movie kind of got a bad rap when it came out. It got mostly mixed reviews, but it did go on to become a very successful hit, over $204 million at the box office. This was actually Dean Parasot's first film after Galaxy Quest. I missed my mark there for a second, but Galaxy Quest, of course, was released on Christmas 6 years prior to this, but the film has gotten mostly a mixed reception when it came out in theaters, and nobody really ever talks about it since then, but honestly, there's stuff I like about this movie that I think makes it a watchable film. There are definitely a lot of flaws to it. I mean, really, the best thing about the movie in general is when they start committing the robberies. But unfortunately, it's not until more than halfway through the movie, and you got these really, really lazy, slapsticky bits of comedy that sometimes can be funny here and there, but they are very few and far between. Like, the real fun of the movie doesn't really start until they go ahead and start committing the robberies. And, you know, there's a lot of stuff that happens before this that works sometimes, but the real comedy doesn't begin until they actually go around and start doing the robberies and all, because that's when the movie really, really gets funny. The way they commit the robberies, you see it a little bit in the trailer there, you know, they're trying to be menacing, but they always run into obstacles, like running into their best friend, you know, when they're trying to rob him at the ATM, and like, it's just like, hey, gotcha, and all that type of stuff, but, really, the fun stuff doesn't come until the second half of the movie. About more than halfway into the second half of the movie, quite honestly. Like, that's when I think Jim Carrey and Téa Leoni really get a chance to show what they can do in terms of comedy, especially Jim Carrey. Like, there's a great moment in the movie where, you know, he's finding out he's going to get indicted, so he goes into this bar, and he has like I think they say he has like one drink or not even a full drink, but a sip of drinks. But he's just like walking around acting drunk, talking about being a corporate puppet. I mean, this is a really, really funny moment. Like, honestly, when you look at that, that's when you know that Jim Carrey is having a ball playing this character. And I don't know, it's just funny to hear Jim Carrey say something like, you know, I'm a corporate puppet, and just saying buy the bullshit the way he does. Like, that's funny stuff. The way they get revenge on Alec Baldwin's character at the end of the movie is well done. You know, it's weird because this is a Judd Apatow and Nicholas Starler's written script. These are the guys that would, of course, be behind some of the more notable comedies of this latter half of the decade, especially Nicholas Starler, who did Forgetting Sarah Marshall later on. And really, it doesn't really feel like it's their type of a movie. It feels like more of a mainstream film, because it is a mainstream film compared to what these guys will do later on their own merits. But, yeah, like I said, the best stuff of this really doesn't happen until the second half of the movie. But it's enough for me to say that it's a good, fun movie. It's a film that I think has a lot of good moments, but you have to wait a little bit to really get to the good, fun stuff. But other than that, though, yeah, I'd say it's worthy enough. I don't know, it's for a decent watch on a Saturday afternoon. If you literally have nothing else to do, if there's nothing else to watch, this one's definitely worth a watch. I think it's very fun, but yeah, be prepared to sit through a lot of dry spots here and there. But once you get to the second half, that's where the real fun with Dick and Jane really is. So with that said, let's go ahead and move on to our next movie, which is Cheaper by the Dozen 2. So this is, like I said before, the second of the two family with multiple kids movies that we have in 2005, and of course this is the sequel to the much more successful one from a couple of years prior, which you know good and goddamn well why Yours, Mine, and Ours came out, because that movie was successful, and they were already working on the sequel to this one. And in this one, you have The Baker family, once again, with a lot of the same people from the previous movie, as they go on a vacation and contend with a rival family, the Murtaughs, who are played by Eugene Levy and Carmen Electra as the couple. I mean, you figure that out. I mean, that's already... is like, at that point, if you're not already stretching the reality and going along for the ride at that point, you're probably not going to enjoy this movie. But you also have Jamie King involved in here, Robbie Amell, who would later become Arrow on the television series, Taylor Lautner, pre-Twilight, and Jonathan Bennett, who you've seen in a ton of stuff before. This is directed by Adam Shakeman. Even though Sean Levy, the original director, is involved in this movie, he's a producer and has a cameo. He's working on the Pink Panther movie around this time, but... yeah, this is definitely not a good movie in general, but it kicks the crap out of yours, mine, and ours. But I will say that it does, kind of like a fun with Dick and Jane, it does have those little moments that kind of make it work, at least for me. Like, I think it's a fun movie. I think it's good. I think it's good. As I said, you go into it knowing exactly what you're going in for. You're going for a comedy sequel that's probably not going to be as good as you expect it to be, because let's be honest, most comedy sequels don't usually do a lot there to really improve on the quality of the original film. They just make it because the first movie made that all the money and all that, and instead just rehash the first movie all over again. But yeah, a lot of it is in this movie, but I give it credit for the stuff that it does do. Like, I like that they use Eugene Levy's character in here. He's not playing the same character he played in, like, The Man. You know, he's not being Jim's dad in American Pie. He actually is playing a different character. And he does get a couple of really good laughs in the movie, alongside Steve Martin. You know, I like the chemistry between Tom Welling and Jamie King. I think that's a very cool... I think that's a very fun little chemistry they have. I like the chemistry between Alison Stoner and Taylor Lautner. Like, remember, Taylor Lautner did start his career off with some promising roles in general, but then Twilight completely ruined him, and then he went on to star in, like, terrible Adam Sandler movies after that. Like I said, not a great movie by any means necessary, but really it's not a bad movie either. It's just your typical comedy sequel. And in terms of comedy sequels, this is one of the few ones that I would say it's passable. If you like the first one and can turn your brain off at the door and just go into it knowing that you're not going to get a very smart movie, just a movie that's going to be fun to watch in general, I think you can go into it and have a good time with it. If you like the first one, I think you can get into this one and enjoy it just as much. But then again, there's not really much more to say about it that's really positive. Like I said, it's not a great movie by any means necessary, but it is a film that, unlike yours, mine, and ours, is at least trying to add something to it. They're at least trying to do something a little bit different, but at the same time, it does feel like a retread that we've seen done before. But really, it's not a bad movie. It's not a bad movie. It's just a movie that's just... it's your typical comedy sequel, but it's definitely, I would say, one of the slightly better ones, but not by that much. I mean, it's just I think it's just because it's Adam Shakeman, and I kind of like what Sean Levy and some other directors have talked about. Adam Shakeman just makes these great comfort food movies. They're fun films that you can go into it knowing what you're going in for, and sometimes you'll get a great movie out of these people here and there, but most of the time, most of the movies they make are not bad movies. They're just good enough where you could say, I liked it. And I can honestly say, I do like Cheaper by the Dozen too. I think it is a fun movie, not a great movie, but fun nonetheless. At least that's my personal opinion on it. Speaking of movies that are fun and probably should not be good movies in any way, shape, or form, let's finally get to Johnny Knoxville as the guy who's pretending to be mentally challenged so he can rig the Special Olympics and make money off of it. He literally tells you this in the trailer for The Ringer. I mean, let's be honest, that's exactly what you do if someone was telling you this plan in general. So, there's an interesting history behind this movie in general. First things first, as you see it by the watermark at the end of the trailer there, this was a trailer released in 2004, because the original intention of this was to release this sometime in early 2005, I'm guessing. I think it was originally... I think if I remember correctly, it was originally scheduled for like a March 05 release. I could be wrong on that. Somewhere around there in general. I think that's why they had that there in the beginning. And then, of course, it got pushed back because I feel like the studio was really scared of how to sell this movie to people. Rightfully so. And it also didn't help that South Park did a notable episode of the show where Cartman had the exact same plan. He's going to rig the Special Olympics because he knows he can, because he thinks that he can beat these special ed kids. And as we find out, that's not the case in general. It's one of the great South Park episodes. It's the one where Jimmy, takes steroids to try to break all the records and all that. And it's just really, really fun episode overall. Really funny episode, especially seeing Cartman getting his comeuppance at the end. But I think that's why this movie also got pushed back too. But in this movie, it centers around Johnny Knoxville, who, as part of a scheme to pay off his debts, poses as being developmentally disabled to compete in the Special Olympics. What's interesting about this movie is that this movie took 7 years to get made. Because of, obviously, the controversial subject. And the Special Olympics Committee eventually agreed to endorse the film. The filmmakers had given them the final say on the script in general. That's the one thing that really took people off guard with this movie, that the Special Olympics actually looked at this and said, yeah, we'll go ahead and finally do this. And, you know, it's a weird idea. Just like this whole movie seems like it should be offensively bad on so many levels, and yet the Special Olympics are the ones that look at this and go like, okay, we'll go along with it. And even the most shocking thing about this whole movie is that it actually is surprisingly heartfelt and actually is a very fun movie. And with an idea like this, you would think that this would be nothing like that whatsoever, but they have good talent on board here in terms of the actors. You've got Johnny Knoxville, who can be very funny, and if you put him in the good role, he can make it work. Brian Cox has a very good fun role here. Even Katherine Heigl was very fun in this movie in general. I like the kids that they have, the guys who play the special ed kids in this. I think they have a lot of chemistry and they have a lot of good elements to them that make them fun characters in general. This is directed by Barry W. Blaustein, who's written a ton of comedies you may be familiar with, like Coming to America, Boomerang. He did the documentary Beyond the Mat. Ricky Blitt, of course, is written for Family Guy. So there's a lot of good talent behind this movie in general. The Farrelly brothers are producing it, of course. And it really does make a movie that it should be really, really distasteful and offensive on so many levels, and yet has that sweet heartness to it that really makes you go like, how the hell did this movie become this? Like, in a way that I would say, good job, man. Good job on these people for making a movie that actually is very, very well done. It's a very fun film. It's not a perfect movie by any means necessary, and it doesn't insult the intelligence of the audience and make these characters stereotypical characters that you would be familiar with. Like, you can understand everybody's situations here. You understand Johnny Knoxville's situation here. Even if you don't agree with what he's going with here, you do like what they're trying to tell you here. And everybody in here just works very, very well. Everyone plays their part to a T. It just works on so many levels. It's a really enjoyable little film. It's not a great movie by any means necessary. It has jokes that don't work as well as they probably should, but it's a film that really is well done in more aspects than you could possibly imagine. I think it's a very enjoyable film, and one I would say definitely check out. If you want to see a good Johnny Knoxville comedy from 2005, this is definitely one I would recommend. Definitely give it a shot. The Ringer. Really, really enjoyable film. So let's continue on here with one of the best movies of the year, Steven Spielberg, doing his twofer for the year. He had War of the Worlds earlier in the year, and now he has his best film overall of the year, and that is Munich. So not surprisingly, the story of Munich is that this is about the story behind Operation Wrath of God, the Israel government's secret retaliation against the Palestinian Liberation Organization after the Munich massacre at the 1972 Olympics. And you follow a man named Yuval Avid, who states he was a Mossad agent, and it follows a squad of assassins as they track down and kill alleged members of the group Black September, which had kidnapped and murdered 11 Israeli athletes. And as I said before, this was one of those years where Spielberg directed two films in the same year, and they were always mixed bag years. One year you would have a really good movie from Spielberg in Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, and then you get something like Always. 93 overall, I think, was probably his best year of doing two really good movies, because he did the first Jurassic Park and the Schindler's List. Another example is 97, when he had The Lost World, Jurassic Park, and Amistad. 2005, War of the Worlds, and then this movie. And then 2002 was a good year, too. Minority Report and Catch Me If You Can. And this was another one of those years where he had two movies. One was not that great in general. It still had some good moments to it, but this was easily his overall best film. I really dug the hell out of this movie. I think Steven Spielberg does a really good job creating a visually stunning world and creating a really good story out of this. With a well-written script by Tony Kushner, who would write for several of Spielberg's movies later on down the road, such as Lincoln and West Side Story. And boasted by a great cast that includes Eric Bana, Daniel Craig, Kieran Hines, Jeffrey Rush, just top talent all around here. And much like what he did with Schindler's List, it's not afraid to go for a more heavier storyline. It's not afraid to give us the cold, hard truth of how rough it was for these people and the obstacles they had to face in general. It's a really good film. Definitely one of Spielberg's great triumphs that doesn't really get the proper attention it deserves. In fact, it wasn't even that big of a hit when it came out in theaters. It actually didn't perform as well as they were expecting it to, but it still received a ton of Oscar nominations, including Best Picture and, of course, Best Director. And, yeah, not much more to say about this one. This is a really good movie, and definitely one of Spielberg's more underrated films in general. This was a great film, Munich. So, with that said, let me go ahead and take a look here and see what the next movie is. Kind of another underrated little comedy that kind of came and went. Jennifer Aniston, Mark Ruffalo, Kevin Costner, Shirley MacLaine starring in Rob Reiner's Rumor Has It. I mean, this is another one of those movies that probably should not work because the plot is very much a gimmick in general, where you have a story where Jennifer Aniston is a woman that finds out that her mother and grandmother may have been the inspiration for the story of The Graduate, of course, the class made into the classic movie with Dustin Hoffman and Anne Bancroft. And Shirley MacLaine is the grandmother in this, and Kevin Costner is the man who supposedly was the Dustin Hoffman character at inspiration in the book for the film. And it's a really interesting idea, a gimmick that could seem like it could go in so many different directions if it's not handled by a really good director. And Rob Reiner has made a lot of really good movies in general. And, you have him, you have Ted Griffin, who has written some notable things. Ocean's 11, Matchstick Men, a couple of really underrated little gems. Of course, did a lot of work for television, The Shield, Terriers. He's a really good writer, and it's a really good idea, and it makes for a very entertaining movie. It got a really good cast: Jennifer Aniston, acting legends like Kevin Costner, Shirley MacLaine, Mark Ruffalo, Mina Suvari, Richard Jenkins involved in here as well. It's a really fun idea and a really interesting storyline that is done very well because you have somebody like Rob Reiner who can make a really good movie out of it. And it's a really fun movie. It's a really fun concept overall, and it really is a film that does take advantage of the plot and does have a lot of really good, funny moments in it. Ridiculously funny moments at times, too. It's definitely one of his more underrated films in general. This was kind of towards the end of his career, really, because he didn't really make a lot of great movies after this. A couple of little underrated gems here and there, like this movie and also Flipped, which came out about 5 years later. I really like this movie a lot. I think it's definitely a lot better than people let on. It's a really good concept, a really fun idea. I'd say definitely check it out. It's definitely one of the better Jennifer Aniston rom-coms, in my personal opinion. I like it a lot. Rumor has it. So let's go ahead and move on to our next movie, which is the horror film Wolf Creek. So Wolf Creek is the story about three backpackers who find themselves taken captive and subsequently hunted by Mick Taylor, a sadistic, psychopathic, xenophobic serial killer in the Australian outback. This was a big deal when it came out. It was a movie that was released at Christmas time, and Weinstein, the Dimension Films, still trying to make this idea that if we release, it worked for Scream, so we're going to keep trying to release these horror movies. Hope we have the next Scream on our hands. And this film did have somewhat of a cult following. I do remember getting some decent reviews overall, and it did eventually go on to have a cult following where it did lead to a sequel and even a TV series spinoff. I personally have never seen the movie. I just never really had any intention on ever watching it. It just really never really was something I wanted to see in general. I heard some good things about it, but I've never seen it, so I can't really say anything about it. Just know that it did come out this weekend. It did get a following over the years, but I personally haven't seen it, so I can't really say if it's any good or not. So with that said, let's go back to some movies I have seen. Let's go ahead and move on to the next movie we have here, which is Heath Ledger in Casanova. Casanova, played by Heath Ledger, is in love with Francesca, played by Sienna Miller, who thinks he is friends of himself, even though he is engaged to Victoria, who is the love of Giovanni, Francesca's brother. Francesca is betrothed to Fabrizio, who thinks Casanova is the feminist writer Guardi, who is really Francesca's nom de plume. Amidst all these secret identities and misunderstandings, the Catholic Church spends Pucci to bring Casanova and Guardi to trial for heresy. Did you get all that? Because I'm not repeating myself again after that. This is directed by Lasse Hallström, who had a movie that came out this year that we did take a look at because of Winn-Dixie, but this is the one that people saw as his overall more successful film in general, which, because of Winn-Dixie, really was not that successful. And This one barely got by with decent box office. It was not a big hit critically either. It was kind of like a mixed reviews in general. And I remember seeing the film in general, and I just thought it was okay. I think the performances by Ledger, Miller, Jeremy Irons, Oliver Platt, Lena Olin, I think they did carry the load here. You also have Charlie Cox, pre-Daredevil, Natalie Dormer, pre-Game of Thrones, Lauren Cohen, pre-Walking Dead. You got a lot of people who went on to become star much better things than this. But as far as the film itself goes, it's fine. There's nothing really about it that really stands out in general. Sometimes you get a good laugh here and there, but I think the performances overall are what carry it over in the long run. It doesn't know exactly if it wants to be more of a mainstream movie or an independent film. I mean, this is Lasse Hallström, who has made a lot of really good films in general. He's made a lot of films that have been much better than this, but yeah, it's just a movie that I just kind of was just like, eh. I mean, I've seen worse, but I've seen much better than this, honestly. So, yeah, not much more to say about Casanova, unfortunately. But let's go ahead and move on to the last one we have here, Terrence Malick's The New World. See, Disney, you don't have to remake Pocahontas into a live-action movie. Terrence Malick already did it for you. And, boy, he made it pretty pretentious, I'll tell you that much. But, this is literally just the live-action equivalent of Pocahontas. Nobody's singing, and it's much more pretentious, and it's Terrence Malick doing what he does best, I guess. But in the story, it depicts the founding of the Jamestown, Virginia settlement and was inspired by the historical figures Captain John Smith, played by Colin Farrell, and Pocahontas, who's played here by Kikorika Kilcher. I think I'm pronouncing that right. I could be wrong on that. The Powhatan tribe, and Englishman John Rolfe. And you have a cast that includes Farrell, Kilcher, Christopher Plummer, Christian Bale, August Schellenberg, Wes Studi, David Thewlis, and yeah, this is about as, like I said, it's a pretty pretentious movie, and it does go way, way too long than it needs to. This is kind of the beginning of the downward trend for Terrence Malick, because, you know, before this he made a couple of decent films, The Thin Red Line, but this was kind of sort of the trend that we came to know from Terrence Malick, where, you know, everything had that pretentious feel to it, you know, stuff like The Tree of Life, To the Wonder, Night of Cups, Song to Song, just very, very generic movies and films that just weren't that great in general overall. They were just movies that were just kind of like, yeah, like this guy has his finger up his, you know what, so much, and it just shows in the latter movies. This was the beginning of kind of that trend in general, because it does get really boring really fast, and it's way too bleak. The cast overall, I think, is fine. I was about to sneeze there, so that's why I got distracted at the end of that, but the cast overall is fine. I think they do carry the load of the film. The actress who's playing Pocahontas, Kurianka, I think it's Kurianka Kilcher. You know, she's fine in the movie. I think she really is the strongest performance in the movie in general. Colin Farrell is fine in here. So is Christian Bale. So is Christopher Plummer. The cinematography looks pretty good. It does have that epic scale to it. You're always going to have a winner when you have James Horner as the composer for your music. I think that really helps the film in general. But overall, yeah, it's a little bit too up its own butt for its own good, and it is the beginning of kind of that trend that Terrence Malick was going to go down eventually. But, yeah, not much more to say about this one in general. Fine, nothing too spectacular. The New World. And so with that said, we wrap up another edition of Time About the Movies, and get ready for another long one next week, because, the next time we do this, I should say, not next week, but the next episode I do, because we have the last weekend of 2005, and I'm going to make that my 2005 Leftovers episode. But before we get to those, we'll take a look at the two new releases that came out that weekend, Woody Allen's Match Point, and also Pierce Brosnan and Greg Kinnear in The Matador. And then we've got these movies to look at. You've got Mulan 2, Kim Possible movie solo drama, Reefer Madness, the movie musical, The Sandlot 2, Tarzan 2, The Proud Family movie, Lilo and Stitch 2 Stitch has a glitch, Roman Polanski's Oliver Twist, The Batman vs. Dracula, and Kronk's New Groove. So that's 12 movies to look at. So, yeah, it's going to be another long one, folks. So I would advise you to grab some popcorn next time around and get ready to sit down for at least over half an hour, because I know that's how long this next one's going to be. So, with all of that said, thank you guys so much for watching. And if you want to see more videos like this, please hit the playlist on the next page, check out the previous episode, and please hit the like, subscribe, and notification button, because we post new videos here every day. With all that said, I am off. I will see you guys next time, and until then, as always, take care.